How's it? William Eggleston is one of those photographers. Either you love him or you hate him. And that picture of the trike looming large seems to be, I don't know about you, a poster child for the kind of photographs that a lot of people would look at and go, yeah, I could take that. So why is that so special? How's he got a book and I don't? Why is he exhibited at a moment and I'm not? This kind of photography, I don't know what I'm going to loosely call it art photography, for want of a better word, through this video, is the sort of imagery that I think trips up so many photographers, especially people who are getting started. I think back to when I was learning photography, it was through magazines and books, physical books about how to, take out from the library. And the images in those books were nice. I think you know what I mean, right? They weren't like stunning. They felt there was something I could achieve. I think that's important when you're teaching people, how to become better or learn the ropes of photography, showing them the great images of the past and stunning landscapes. That feels to me like it's difficult to achieve. So these images, they had that nice feeling. They were of the pretty girl with the backlit hair, the starburst flash, not flash, the filters. You remember those things that all filters slip in there? The gentle rolling hills with the beautiful dapple light, the tree in fall, that kind of stuff. But then you bump up against people like Eggleston and people like Stephen Shaw, Lee Friedlander, Gary Winogrand. This photography now all of a sudden feels very different, right? This is like, hang on, this is nothing like I was now introduced to as a youngster. This looks like kind of somebody's just picked up a camera, taken a couple of random pictures, and called it art. But aren't photographs supposed to have meanings? Aren't they supposed to have like a purpose, show a pretty landscape or a pretty girl, or any of that kind of stuff? What can we ask Eggleston? Let's sit him down. Let's say, Mr. Eggleston, what does that photograph of the trike actually mean?
I regret that that's one of the stupidest questions I've ever been asked.
And then we get rebutted, all right, with the stupidest question ever asked. And therein lies the next problem, is that these photographs don't actually mean anything. I've thought about this for a long time, and I wanted to be a photojournalist when I got started in my career in photography. It didn't really sort of pan out that way, what have you. But I thought, what? Okay, so photographs have to have a meaning. They have to convey something. They have to really, speak to the viewer with a specific message. It took a long time to shake that idea off. And it did hold me back a little bit, I think, as a younger photographer. I was just getting started, because I wasn't free enough to just sort of go, I'm just going to take a picture and sort of see what happens. And through the process of taking an actual photograph, then I can sort of break it apart and have a look at it. So when we look at somebody, like Eggleston and Shaw and all these guys, these photographs, they don't really have meaning. They're not communicating something. They're not part of a picture story. They're not a documentary. They're not a landscape. They're not a portrait of somebody. They're very difficult to pigeonhole. And in many respects, that's what I do like about them, because, we just put in whatever thing we want into them. We can read, a million different ways of these photographs. And that's what makes it cool, because I see something different than you do. And also there's a huge range of things to look at. All of the photographers' work is different. We are, I feel, certainly in my own case, free of having to think about who the subject is or think about the technical aspects, which is something that kind of often dribbles into my mind when I'm looking at especially portrait photography. That the portrait photographer in me is going, how did they do this? And you may get the same thing, when you're looking at a landscape photograph or a more, so let's say down the line, street image. you might be picking apart, and how did they do this? Who's that person? We talked recently about Annie Leibovitz and how some people feel she's only famous because of the people who she photographs. But with these images, I'm devoid of any of that. There's a great line in the BBC documentary, The Genius of Photography, where they're talking about street photography as a broad term, and I'm going to lump sort of street photography and art photography in together, which feels like it's a bit of a shoehorn, but we'll go with it. They say, as photography was evolving, then people would have, they come up against barriers. Landscape photographers, portrait photographers, they were taking images in genres that existed already within the art world. But the street photographer, all of a sudden, had, what was the phrase they used? The ability to just go wild, or had to just try things out and just, do whatever. And when you watch some of these street photographers at work, it seems like, unlike the documentary of people like Ansel Adams or, portrait photographers, that these guys are not actually doing anything. I think for me, that was a real bone in my throat for a bit. It was like, they just wander around with a camera and they don't actually make an effort. All right. That was such a superficial thing to think. Because, of course, while they're not, lights and reflectors and tripods and all this kind of stuff, they're still making a huge amount of effort. It is, as anybody who's photographed on the street or a wedding where you're constantly thinking, it is monumentally tiring because you're always thinking. And what I was missing, of course, obviously, is that all the things that I'd been struggling with as a fledgling photographer, making sure the exposure was right and trying to think about my composition and the lighting and all that kind of stuff. That happens instinctively with these photographers because we're not watching them as a photographer who picked up a camera 5 minutes ago. We are watching them as photographers who have been taking photographs for decades. So a little bit of perspective is always a bit handy here, isn't it? To kind of know. So that was kind of one thing. I thought, okay, so quite clearly they are actually putting in effort, although it doesn't feel like it. Earlier, I mentioned the idea about accessibility, that you look at these photographs and when you're learning and you go, I could do that. But at the same point, I want to take a picture that doesn't look like everybody else's. So when I look at stuff that, people used to teach, especially these days, you go, okay, well, that's kind of cool because I feel like I would have accomplished something. When I look at, images by, all the photographers who we're looking at today, you sort of go, oh, well, hang on a second. This looks like something else anybody can do. So why would I do that? It's not going to stand out on Instagram or any of those kind of natures. And with that, I was like, do you know what? I think a lot of people are missing a trick. I get it that, we all want to go off and kind of take kind of cool pictures. People kind of wow and stuff. And I feel that all of the images that we've been looking at today, and I don't know about you, but I certainly feel this, and I'm going to choose my words carefully here so I don't get misunderstood, is that these photographs don't necessarily have a wow factor. And let that sink in for a little bit. The images, I think, are great. I would certainly have some of them on the wall. I enjoy looking at them. I think they're really great. But should you walk through a gallery or an exhibition, a lot of them are not going to stop you in your tracks. They're all quite quiet for the most. But I think William Klein's images feel a little, they're a bit more kind of, what, in your face. So what happens is when, you're looking at these photographs that, and especially in a book, say like this, which is a book called Into the Sunset, Photography's Image of the American West, that yes, there are some landscape photographs. Obviously the West is a physical place. They want some landscapes. But within those, the images, whether or not they are landscapes or people or events or places or things, the images are all quiet. I think in today's modern world, that's a problem. Doesn't matter how old you are, how long you've been in photography. In today's environment, loud photographs, shouty photographs, images that are brash or want to kind of like just yell, go, hello, look at me, right? They seem to hold sway these days. So it's natural when people who are maybe, new to photography would look at the trike that we looked at earlier at the beginning of the video and say, I don't get it. What's the point? Why is this so fabulous? Because it's not easy to define. I can't say it's a spectacular landscape. I can't say the lighting is amazing. It doesn't use a fancy pants technique apart from sort of that low perspective. It doesn't tick any of the boxes that a lot of, I think, people feel photography should be today. Now, there's something else that's an issue with this kind of photography, and a lot of artistic ideas in photography, if you want to call them that, things like the decisive moment and anything's a little bit more kind of highbrow beyond technical aspects, is that there are certain people who will sit there and go, well, this is great because think about the depths, this thing, it has a meaning of the modern world and how we're all being overawed by our childlike sensibilities and a playfulness. It's like that people can write an awful lot of waffle about these images, which it also makes them inaccessible because they've been pushed into this world of like, if you feel like you can't talk about them in a pop sort of way, then you're not allowed to enjoy them, that you have to sort of say that. But then equally, you might feel, and maybe you felt in this video up until this point, that you go like, well, I don't get it, but Alex seems to really like it, so maybe I need to like it. That there is that sort of vibe that, people can sit there and go, well, it's William Eggleston, or it's Joel Meyerowitz, or it's, whoever. You must like them because they're amazing. And everybody says they're amazing. And if you say anything to the contrary, people go, well, then you don't know what you're talking about. I once said that I preferred Robert Adams's landscape photographs to Ansel Adams's images. Now, that's a personal taste thing. Robert Adams's images just talk to me more. But there were some people who went, oh my God, well, you know nothing about photography if you like this. And I think that's a real issue that annoys me a lot, really. And I'm not going to get into it now because I would start soapboxing. Nobody wants me soapboxing right now about sort of things. But that's, I think, what is a huge problem with photography that I certainly enjoy. Make no mistake, I love a lot of the work of Eggleston and Shaw and Meyerowitz and all these guys who we talked about, but I don't love it all. If you take one lesson from this video, it is, it's okay to like bits of things. It is okay if you go, do you know what, that picture of the trike, I don't get it. I think it's dull. I think it's stupid. That's fine. But don't push away everything based on one experience. I've looked at an awful lot of photography through my life, right? As may you have. And I have to say, probably the majority of it, I don't care for. But that's the beauty of the thing. I've at least looked at it, right? At least tried it out. I don't like jazz music, but I've listened to it. My father-in-law is a jazz aficionado. So, I've been exposed to it enough to kind of go, all right, it's not my thing. All this work here, if it's not your thing, then it's fine to say, okay, I don't really care for this sort of photography. So I did get on a bit of a soapbox there. I do apologize. It's just, I find it, and this photography, this kind of photography is the perfect showcase for this, that a lot of people do fall into this trap that we talked about of like, you need to put in a lot of effort, that it needs to have some sort of wow factor. It needs to have X, Y, and Z things to be a proper photograph, to be something that is important. And look how I slipped into that word, important. And it's not about being important. It's about taking photographs that you enjoy. There's a book here called Mid-Century Memories. And a lot of the images in here are, well, in fact, all of them, they are by anonymous photographers. They're collections of slides that were found in junk shops and places like that, where they've just been collected. Now, some of these, the majority of them, are, they're average pictures. They give us an insight into life as it was in the mid-century period. But there are some images that I absolutely adore. And had they been taken by somebody, Eggleston or Friedland or anyone like that, would be, oh my God, these are the most amazing pictures ever. Because certain people, the tastemakers, for want of a better word, all those sort of people, would hold it up and say, look at this is amazing. And in that phrase, in that short sentence, you have everything that I think is wrong. And I want to make photography inclusive. I want to help people come in. And I think if there are people who stand up, and some of them are very knowledgeable, what have you, but a lot of people just stand up and they'll say, this photography is great because everybody says so, but this is not. That sort of just goes contrary to everything that I like about photography. All of us can pick up a camera. All of us can take a photograph of whatever we want in our own way. Some people will just get lucky, and often it is kind of luck. Some people make the effort and maybe get, a show, or like for a lot of the photographers who we've talked about today, they were operating in the 1960s, 1970s, where it was a golden era for this kind of photography. It was in the zeitgeist. And they just did their thing. I want you to, to at least have an insight, and maybe it will encourage you to look at this kind of photography in a way that you hadn't considered previously. Or maybe it's just confirmed your idea that, it's actually all just dross. It's not your kind of thing. Either way, you've taken a step into looking at photography that's outside of your comfort zone, or you're not familiar with, and making a decision whether or not it's for you. So good on you, man. I think that's awesome. And I really appreciate you being here. I love talking to you about photography and, just sharing all stuff. I have tons of these books around, just, Mid-Century Memories. It's one of my favorite books of last year. And I did do a whole video on it, which, if you're interested, click over here. Thank you ever so much again, and I will see you again soon.